Right now, the Suwałki Corridor. A breakthrough. Poland and Lithuania are already on the front line. Nato is in shock. The clock is ticking. Putin's emergency decree is already on the table. Urgent! Ukrainian drones have reached his palace. Sochi is on fire, and the dictator himself could have been trapped in this ambush. Finland is preparing to march on Moscow. This has shocked everyone. Something terrible is coming. A sensation at the front. These new technologies of the Ukrainian armed forces could turn the tide of the war. Ukraine is unleashing AI-powered drones for the hunt. Russia is already in panic. Shock! Trump has rocked the world. A brutal murder in the US has brought America to a boiling point. At the same time, Simonyan shocked everyone with her confession after surgery. And Solovyov's friends have stripped Russia to the bone. Russians are in shock. The Ukrainian armed forces are liberating Ukraine. Russians are simply being thrown out. The front has flared up and the occupiers' losses are growing every day. This is only the beginning of the collapse of their plans. A new fit from Kadyrov. His illness is progressing and the statements from the head of Chechnya have shocked the world. This could change everything we know about the end of the war. All this and more in our program Hotspot. Shock. A blow to NATO. Poland and Lithuania are on the front line. The Suwałki Corridor is under threat. NATO is in shock. This could be the beginning of World War III. This has turned everything upside down. Watch all the details of this sensational forecast right now.
The Suwałki Corridor is NATO's most vulnerable spot, and in the near future, Putin may attempt to invade this Achilles heel. This is reported by the British publication The Sun.
We are witnessing an increased Russian military presence in Kaliningrad and Belarus. We are seeing sudden military exercises and unusual troop movements. We are facing a hybrid war with GPS jamming, sabotage of underwater vessels, and little green men stirring up unrest among Russian-speaking minorities.
We are talking about the so-called Suwałki Corridor, which is about 100 kilometers long and connects Poland with the Baltic states. Military analysts often describe this area as the most dangerous zone in NATO. If Russia and Belarus seize this corridor, they will cut off Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia from their European NATO allies.
Anything that resembles a large-scale military buildup on the border with Ukraine, similar to what happened right before the 2022 war, should be interpreted as a serious warning sign. The movement of fuel, vehicles, and other military assets can serve as an indication of an impending invasion.
The Zapad 2025 military exercises, which will be jointly conducted by Russia and Belarus from September 12th to 16th, will partly take place near the borders with Poland and Lithuania.
We must take exercises near the borders of NATO and the EU very seriously. Both neighboring countries and NATO itself treat them with the utmost seriousness. Lithuania and our allies are prepared, united, and closely monitoring developments, ready to respond if necessary.
Military experts are urging close attention to these exercises. And the NATO countries bordering Russia are conducting their own military exercises during the same period. 10 Northern European NATO countries are participating in the Thraces 25 exercises, while Lithuania is conducting its own national defense drills called Thunder Strike. Poland is holding its own Iron Defender 25 exercises, which have brought together 30,000 service members.
We need to set challenging tasks for our troops and make them think outside the box. It's not just about getting to the exercise site and setting up camp. We need real challenges. Russia knows that if we are fully armed and ready for battle, they will definitely lose. So, we certainly won't be given the easiest conditions. We'll definitely have to operate under significant pressure.
The Suwałki Corridor is the only land route for NATO forces to reach Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. It is considered the Achilles heel of the alliance due to its limited military capabilities compared to other NATO members. The Kaliningrad region and the Suwałki Corridor are seen as potentially dangerous areas, since they are the routes through which Russia could try to blockade the Baltic states, by sea on one side and by land on the other. It is possible that Moscow will use the Zapad 2025 exercises to test NATO's response to provocations. Moscow is ramping up the mobilization of the Russian population and economy. This confirms that the aggressor country is preparing for a possible war with NATO, and the Suwałki Corridor is the most likely place for the confrontation to begin.
Urgent. Putin is under attack by Ukrainian drones. It has happened. Sochi is on fire. And at that moment, the dictator himself could have been in the city. This has never happened before. Meanwhile, a new war is brewing. Finland is preparing to march on Moscow. This statement shocked everyone. The countdown has begun. All the details are in the report.
Vladimir Putin himself is in the crosshairs of a Ukrainian armed forces drone.
I seriously doubt I can add anything further here.
It was very loud in the Adler district of Sochi. According to local residents, the walls in their homes shook and the windows rattled. The carpet emergency plan was implemented at the airport.
It was quiet. Everything was covered in smoke.
But that's not the most interesting part. The main thing is something else. At the time of the attack, Putin could have been in Sochi. The day before, he participated via video link in an emergency BRICS meeting. According to the agency's publication, the presidential aircraft is still in Sochi. Well, Ukrainian drones gave the Russian dictator quite a welcome.
This is a matter of life and death.
But Putin can't hide anywhere. The Ukrainian armed forces drones can reach him anywhere. And by the way, besides Sochi, there were also explosions in temporarily occupied Crimea.
Now, somewhere in this very moment, I am indeed answering your question, providing a comprehensive and thoughtful response.
And what's more, Putin has grown bolder. With a strike on the building of the Ukrainian cabinet of ministers, the Russian dictator is starting a new phase of the war. This is being reported by the Western press. Putin's self-confidence increased after his return from Beijing, where he stated that relations between Russia and China are at an unprecedentedly high level, according to British analysts.
I personally think that, first and foremost, the Russian side truly tried to, A, issue a very strong ultimatum to Ukraine, first of all, specifically regarding the negotiation process, meaning that Ukraine should be much more accommodating and flexible in their approach. If you absolutely do not agree to our non-negotiable ultimatums, we will unequivocally continue to strike administrative buildings, and we will even target the private homes or specific locations where top-ranking government officials currently reside or are presently present. And the second crucial point to consider is that a particular sort of condition, essentially a form of blackmail, could potentially be established, specifically not to launch any strikes against Russia's vital oil refining industry.
Ukrainian drone attacks on key oil refineries and important oil facilities in Russia have led to the shutdown of at least 17% of the country's refining capacity. Now, however, the Kremlin dictator is preparing for a fall offensive, as evidenced by the active redeployment of troops to various sections of the front. At the center of events, of course, is the Donbass. In addition to attempts to advance into Pokrovsk, Kramatorsk and the Konstantinovka agglomeration, the enemy will also continue its offensive in the Lyman direction, according to the Institute for the Study of War.
Russian occupation forces are now entering the phase of the autumn-winter offensive campaign. For them, this phase will be much more difficult than the summer offensive campaign, primarily due to weather conditions. Another problem is that during the summer offensive campaign, Russian occupation forces failed to create in almost any direction the necessary conditions, not just in a tactical sense, but in an operational and operational tactical sense. For what? For the start of urban combat. The result is that in Konstantinivka, the conditions for urban combat have not been created. In Siversk, Borova and Lyman, the conditions for urban combat have not been created either. Especially so. Only in Kupiansk do Russian forces have access from the northwest to the northwestern outskirts of the city.
Meanwhile, Putin's loyal servant Medvedev has stated that Finland is preparing to attack Russia. He accuses the Finns of Russophobia and claims that the Finnish authorities allegedly tried to destroy the historical and cultural identity of Russians and commit genocide against Slavs. But all of Medvedev's arguments about the root causes of the conflict with Finland simply repeat the Kremlin's rhetoric, which it shifted toward Ukraine in 2014 and 2022, after which Putin started the war.
I can simply attribute Dmitry Medvedev's recent statement to yet another unfortunate stage of his ongoing alcohol addiction and the severe, debilitating consequences of that profound addiction. In other words, it is nothing more than his delusional ramblings and unfounded assertions for the avid readers of that truly insane and highly questionable Telegram channel.
Russia is a country that is always seeking war and brings only destruction. According to the IAEA, all the main principles of nuclear safety have been violated at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which is currently occupied by Russian forces.
During the prolonged occupation, the entire power plant has unfortunately fallen into a significant state of decline, and regrettably, all of these critical factors collectively affect the overall level of operational safety and security. The Russian Federation is not genuinely interested in complying with all the necessary safety standards or in properly maintaining the plant as it absolutely should be. So yes, for the Russians, this is simply an object, to some extent even primarily a tool of informational blackmail.
Meanwhile, Ukraine may receive new mobile Skyranger air defense systems from Germany by the end of 2025. This was reported by the CEO of the defense company Rheinmetall. According to him, a contract worth hundreds of millions of euros will be signed on September 10th at the Defense Industry Exhibition. Meanwhile, a Belarusian spy network has been dismantled in Europe. It was organized by the Belarusian State Security Committee with the aim of recruiting agents and gathering intelligence data.
Sensational news. Ukraine has done the incredible. New UAVs are going on the hunt. The Russians are already in a panic. This will turn the tide at the front. AI-powered drones have seriously frightened the enemy. How will these new technologies determine the outcome of the battle? All the details right now.
New technologies mean new challenges. Artificial intelligence, having already conquered advanced gadget users, is now being actively used in warfare. Today, almost no modern drone is produced without this technology. Ukrainians, of course, are among the leading UAV designers. For example, our developers are already actively testing a new interceptor drone. The Ukrainian company Varta is working on implementing an autonomous system for detecting and tracking enemy reconnaissance UAVs and FPV drones for interceptor drones based on artificial intelligence.
Certain components of artificial intelligence systems are indeed already being used in the war that Russia unleashed against Ukraine. And Ukraine is defending itself with technologies that help save human resources, especially when it comes to time. Ukraine is defending itself by using technological components that maximize the effectiveness of drones in the final meters of their approach to the target when control over the device is already being lost.
It is reported that the drone will be called Varta Dozor A1 and is already in the final phase of testing. Its main task will be to destroy Russian strike UAVs, which are launched daily against peaceful cities in Ukraine.
We're talking about Geran, Gerbera, Parody, and other drones. Currently, Russia is demonstrably capable of producing and deploying a significant number of 5,000 to 6,000 such drones per month. The largest and most impactful attack we've observed so far involved a substantial quantity of up to 500 drones, showcasing their potential scale and operational capacity. But in order to carry out such an attack, Russia needed at least 3 to 4 days to accumulate them.
It has been stated that the Dozor A1 will be able to independently detect and destroy enemy FPV and reconnaissance UAVs even under electronic warfare conditions. That is, the drone can be used directly on the front line, where there are plenty of targets for it literally every minute. After all, the Russian Federation has significantly increased its use of drones lately.
After the direct strike, the enemy aircraft or drone immediately detonates, and its rapidly expanding shrapnel effectively destroys the hostile enemy drone.
However, drone warfare, as they say one-on-one, still allows for the possibility of a miss. No matter how hard artificial intelligence tries, some Russian drones are also equipped with countermeasures. That's why engineers are already working on improving the Dozor A1.
In the future, integration with situational awareness systems is planned, particularly with the Delta system. If implemented in the future, this will allow a single operator to control a group of 5 to 7 interceptors, creating the concept of the so-called small sky, an air defense segment where interceptor drones will play a key role.
Russian designers are also trying to catch up with our engineers. For example, one of the enemy's new developments is the BM-35 kamikaze drone. A video of its use in the center of Sumy recently appeared online. Our experts are currently studying the characteristics of this UAV. It is still unknown what kind of warhead it can be equipped with. However, the lawnmower engine and the propeller drive system indicate that the drone does not fly far and will not be used against military targets, but was obviously developed specifically to terrorize civilians in frontline cities.
We are fighting against a truly dangerous, incredibly aggressive enemy who absolutely does not value human life at all. And we need to be very careful in how we approach the changes that are happening there. Modern equipment can exist on the territory of the Russian Federation. Russia can circumvent sanctions to produce prototypes, but it cannot circumvent sanctions when it comes to mass production, when there is a need to manufacture 1,000 units. They are demonstrating an inability to produce drones independently.
The results of the work by Ukrainian experts who examined the remains of the BM-35 at the site of impact serve as confirmation of this thesis. As a result, about half of the components are of foreign origin.
The drone's design contains at least 41 foreign components, including parts from Switzerland, the USA, and Taiwan. At the same time, most of the parts come from China.
According to analysts, one of the significant levers of influence on the situation could be the tightening of US and European sanctions, as well as more thorough enforcement of existing restrictions. After all, the more Russian loopholes are closed, the fewer drones will end up flying over the heads of Ukrainians. And at the same time develop our own technologies so that for every new terrorist attack, the Russians receive an appropriate response.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now. Shock. Trump rocked the world. A brutal murder in the USA. America is boiling. At the same time, Simonyan shocked everyone with a confession. She woke up after surgery and something unexpected happened. What is really going on? But it gets worse. Solovyov's friends robbed Russians. A massive scam on supplies for Moscow's army. This will surprise you. All the details coming up.
US President Trump accused the Democrats of the horrific murder of a refugee from Ukraine. A repeat offender stabbed the young woman on a bus.
I send my love and hope to the family of the young woman who was stabbed last night in Charlotte by a deranged psychopath. He just stood up with a knife and attacked. It's all on video. It's impossible to watch. It's horrific.
Olena Zelenska will meet with Melania Trump. According to statements, they will discuss many important topics for Ukraine. It is likely that the First Lady of Ukraine will try to influence the US president through his wife, whose opinion he always listens to.
We are planning a meeting during the UN General Assembly this month, and I think that the topics being discussed in Kyiv today will also become topics for discussion in New York. We will have an event under the umbrella of the summit and events dedicated to education. I think we will meet there as well, and we will meet one-on-one to discuss other topics.
Inspired by his trip to Beijing, the Russian dictator has launched a new stage of the war. For the first time, a strike was carried out on the decision-making center in the government quarter.
I wouldn't directly draw a parallel between Putin's trip to China, but indeed, on the sidelines of the SCO, Putin once again secured support from Beijing. And essentially, Beijing has demonstrated to the US and the entire Western world that today the Celestial Empire is ready to challenge the world order we are accustomed to, the one established after World War II and later solidified with the collapse of the Soviet Union.
Even as the military situation is clearly escalating, the Trump administration unilaterally ended cooperation with European countries in combating disinformation coming from Russia, China, and Iran.
As for the US withdrawing from those projects where, together with the Europeans, they were countering Russian disinformation, this looks more like the implementation of Trump's policy aimed at isolation and saving money.
Trump stated that he is ready to move to the second phase of sanctions against Moscow and said that for this to happen, the Europeans must stop buying Russian gas. At the same time, he did not specify whether he had already made a final decision or what exactly the second phase of sanctions would entail. Yes.
We'll see. We'll take a look. I mean, we're having some very interesting discussions. Some European leaders will come here to us, and I think we'll resolve this issue. We'll sort it all out.
In fact, Trump has raised a very important issue. If not hypocrisy, then it's a rather ambivalent position on the part of the Europeans who constantly claim that they are pressuring Russia with sanctions, but over 3.5 years of full-scale war, they have purchased more Russian energy resources than they have provided to Ukraine in support.
While Europe and the US still can't make important decisions, Medvedev, locked away in his lair, has once again come out and made a statement. According to him, after joining NATO, Finland is preparing a springboard for an attack on Russia under the guise of strengthening its defense. His talking points about Finland are identical to Putin's rhetoric before the invasion of Ukraine.
We will see provocations of this kind not only against Finland, but also against the Baltic countries. Russia understands the points that are currently the weakest for the Western world and will target them. And it's obvious that the world is already in a state of hybrid war.
Meanwhile, Putin's chief propagandist, Simonyan, is in a coma. She has been diagnosed with cancer. Simonyan has already undergone surgery, and now there is active discussion about who will replace her as the head of Russia today.
This week I was diagnosed with terrible, serious illnesses, and tomorrow I have surgery, right here under this mask. Of course, you know that my husband, Tigran Keosayan, has been in a coma in the hospital for 9 months now. As they say in Russia, when trouble comes, it throws the gates wide open. Well, in our house, the gates just don't close anymore. They've practically been blown off, I think.
Associates of the propagandist Solovyov, his producers and commercial director, have received government contracts to supply food and materials for the army. Contracts that used to be handled by Prigozhin's company, earning, according to Putin himself, billions.
By consistently supplying essential food and diligently providing comprehensive catering services to the army, I successfully made a substantial 80 billion rubles. The state took on the full responsibility for funding, and part of this entire group is the company Konkurs. At the same time, they earned 80 billion rubles. But I hope that during these operations, no one stole anything, or at least, let's say, stole less. but of course we are definitely looking into all of this. For now,
While Putin continues his bloody war, his loyal propagandists keep profiting from it. Meanwhile, Russia's population is shrinking and growing poorer at record rates.
Breaking news from the front, the Ukrainian armed forces have liberated Vladimirovka and driven the Russians out of 3 more villages. This is only the beginning of the occupiers' collapse. The unbelievable has happened. The front has flared up, Russians are in panic, and their losses are mounting. A more detailed picture of the battles is in the report.
They are destroying the enemy and reclaiming Ukrainian territories. The Ukrainian armed forces have liberated the village of Vladimirovka in the Donetsk region and have also driven the occupiers out of 3 other settlements. According to analysts, Ukrainian forces have pushed Russian troops back from Razinovo, Zolotovo, Kolotsia and Novotoretskoye.
The advance of Ukraine's defense forces in the Razin area removes for the time being the possibility of restoring direct control over the main location of Ukraine's defense forces. This is the highway in the Rodenskaya area. This is a significant tactical success for Ukraine's defense forces. Regarding Zolotovo, Kolotsia and Novotoretskoye, these are in the Pokrovsk direction, which indicates stabilization measures by Ukraine's defense forces in the area. And
while the occupiers are counting their losses at the front, in Russia they are tallying up the damages. The armed forces of Ukraine attacked the Ilsky oil refinery in Krasnodar Krai with drones. The Druzhba oil pipeline was also hit once again, this time in Naitopovichi-Bryansk region. This facility is of strategic importance for supplying petroleum products to the Russian occupation army. But the enemy is not idle either. On Sunday night, Russian terrorists launched a combined strike on Ukraine with missiles and drones. At the same time, the number of strike assets used was the largest since the start of the full-scale invasion. For the first time during the war, the Cabinet of Ministers building in Kyiv's government quarter was damaged during the attack. There were also strikes on the Kryukiv bridge over the Dnipro in Poltava region. According to a British publication, the largest attack on Ukraine indicates the Russian dictator's unwillingness to end the war. And the shelling of the Ukrainian government building is a deliberate element of Putin's strategy, foreign observers write.
The primary target audience for these demonstrative actions by the occupying army is, first and foremost, the American. Moreover, I would like to point out that once again the strikes on both the government quarter and the logistical infrastructure of the Ukrainian side, as well as on the energy system of the Ukrainian economy, are taking place on the eve of Trump's meeting with European leaders. And first and foremost, what will be discussed are the so-called issues of security for Ukrainian statehood, that is, the so-called security guarantees.
Already on the night before Monday, the aggressor country carried out a new massive attack on Ukraine's energy system. One of the thermal power generation facilities in the Kyiv region came under attack.
Unfortunately, the Russian Federation will increase the number of attacks on energy facilities on the territory of our country. This has already become a constant tactic of the Russian occupation forces, either at the beginning or during the heating season, to plunge Ukraine into darkness, both literally and figuratively.
To fight the occupiers, Ukraine is doing everything possible, developing the largest military-industrial complex. A Ukrainian drone manufacturer will build a drone production plant in the United Kingdom. Mass production is planned to start at the beginning of next year.
In addition to the UK, there are large-scale AAA projects, a joint UAV project in Denmark, Germany, and a number of other European countries. This is evidence that European partners understand Ukraine's defense needs and the necessity to increase the number of strike assets. First and foremost, this concerns strike drones with a range of over 1,500 kilometers. Accordingly, the production of FPV drones is being scaled up.
Meanwhile, Putin may be preparing for yet another war. The Russian dictator might attempt an invasion of the Achilles heel, the Suwałki Corridor.
At the moment, Russia has not escalated this issue in light of international efforts, primarily from the American side, to end the war in Ukraine. In other words, we can view this as an element of military political pressure on European partners and the United States. That is, the Russian Federation is proposing a scenario of non-interference in the internal affairs of these countries, primarily Poland and the Baltic states, and their possible occupation in exchange for concessions on the Ukrainian issue, specifically territorial concessions from our country. First and foremost, this concerns the complete control of Russian occupation forces over the territory of Donetsk region.
Let us recall that analysts from the Institute for the Study of War have noted that the head of the Kremlin is making long-term plans for rearmament. At the same time, Moscow is intensifying the mobilization of the Russian population and economy.
Shock, another seizure for Kadyrov. The illness is progressing and his statements are becoming increasingly insane. The head of Chechnya has come out with new nonsense and unexpected condition for ending the war. This statement is blowing up the internet. Shocking details, watch now.
Through Kadyrov's words, a truth is spoken that Putin is afraid to voice. The head of the Chechen Republic explained that it is currently not in Russia's interest to stop the fighting and that peace is only possible when Ukraine becomes a region of Russia. In essence, this statement is the complete opposite of Putin's claim that Russia is ready for negotiations.
Such a publication serves two purposes. The first purpose is to show that he is still alive and can even do something. And the second purpose is to show that supposedly there are not only people like Putin in Russia who is even ready to give up parts of the Zaporizhzhia and Kherson regions, which they have already incorporated into their constitution, but also so-called hawks who will settle for nothing less than all of Ukraine. This is meant to make Putin look not so bad, to have something to show in the first place.
Kadyrov claims that he is not a supporter of stopping hostilities in the area the Russian occupiers call the special military operation, and that a ceasefire there is currently disadvantageous for Russians.
This is an attempt to show that Putin is still, relatively speaking, sane, while there are some truly crazy people around him, and that he is the one restraining these completely insane individuals. And accordingly, on the one hand, we see this nonsense that Kadyrov is spouting, and on the other hand, we see some kind of super mega cool move in Moscow, right, to show that we have these completely insane people with crazy demands.
Kadyrov's insane idea about Ukraine is coming to an end. Not so long ago, he claimed that the President of America, Donald Trump, is a Chechen.
After the failure, the actual failure of the talks in Anchorage, and after this demonstrative performance in China, I don't think Trump will enter into direct negotiations with Putin anytime soon. Yes, maybe if he manages, he will arrange a meeting between the three of them, Putin, Zelensky, and himself, Trump. But I don't think he will go for direct negotiations with Putin.
Ramzan Kadyrov is a service dog who obediently follows his master's orders, getting his bone as a reward. And it doesn't really matter to him who gives him that bone, whether it's one master or another, it's not important to him.
If something were to happen to Putin, then Kadyrov's armed bandits could potentially play a certain significant role in the redistribution of power after Putin, and could side with one of the groups that will be fighting for power.
Nevertheless, no matter how you look at it, everything Kadyrov does comes from Putin. And what the Kremlin master cannot say or show himself is done for him by his dim-witted servants, most likely without much thought.
That's all for now. For more major and urgent news from the front, tune in to the next episode.